Did you ever hear the tragedy of the one they called the Wise? Not a tale the Keepers of Light would dare to share. For centuries, the Shadows waited, their venom seeping into the heart of the galaxy, corroding both its order and its guardians. The rise of a dark figure was no accident, but the result of meticulous design. He was the one who lifted the Sith from obscurity into dominion, who bent the very essence of life itself to his will, who dissected the Force down to its smallest breath and commanded it as none before him dared. And yet his story begins, not with triumph, but with a master, an ancient being seeking not an heir, but a vessel to carry his spirit beyond death. From this twisted ambition, destiny wove its path, and so opened the first chapter of a legacy that would shape an empire born from betrayal, ambition, and darkness. With his super-enhanced alien mind, Tenebrous foresaw that the Chosen One would emerge in the coming generations. To control them, he created a virus called the midi-chlorians, capable of housing his consciousness within a host body, granting him control over their powers and mind. His ultimate goal was to locate the Chosen One while still a child, possess them before they could resist, and harness their immense power to rule forever. Though it would take years before the Chosen One was born, Tenebrous needed a powerful host in the meantime. By chance, he met Hego Damask, an agent of the Intergalactic Banking Clan, who was Force-sensitive but lacked the required strength. Later, Tenebrous encountered another Moon, a female with similar traits, though still not powerful enough for his taste. He realized that combining the two could create something extraordinary, so he manipulated the woman into becoming his disciple, not officially his apprentice, but enough to serve his greater plan. As part of his scheme, she became his codicil wife, a term for a secondary partner in her society, unknowingly playing her role in his dark agenda. The exact date of his birth remains a mystery, as he himself left behind conflicting accounts of his early life. Somewhere between 167 and 130 years before the Great Battle, a woman gave birth to a boy named Hego after his grandfather. His father dismissed him as insignificant, never realizing the potential that had been born. But his mother saw what others could not. She smothered his childhood with relentless control, recording every detail, every secret thought, never allowing him out of her watchful gaze. Growing up in the Dome City, Hego lived under her constant observation, his playmates carefully chosen only so she could study his interactions before interrogating him about each encounter. She waited eagerly for the first signs of power, the moment her master's command could finally be fulfilled. By the age of 5, the boy revealed his gift, probing the emotions of others and testing his influence. One day, consumed by dislike, he pushed his limits too far, convincing another child to leap from a high window, ending the life of his victim. His mother urged him to keep the secret close, revealing that she too shared the same gift. Now that his powers had awakened and leaned toward darkness, she reached out to the one who had been waiting, setting into motion the next step of his destiny. In a time before the rise of the Empire, Hego Damask II, later known as Darth Plagueis the Wise, was shaped by dark forces. His path to power began when he was handed over to Darth Tenebrous, a Sith Lord with a grand plan for the galaxy. Tenebrous, under the alias Rugus Nov, was a highly regarded starship designer and used his position to manipulate the galaxy's elite. Plagueis, trained in the ways of the Sith from a young age, quickly embraced the shadows. His life, destined to be one of control and obsession, was sealed. Under Tenebrous's tutelage, Plagueis learned the Sith way, and soon his ambition overtook his master. Plagueis killed Tenebrous and took over the Sith's ultimate goal. Using his knowledge of politics and wealth, Plagueis manipulated galactic events, seeking immortality through the manipulation of midi-chlorians. His greatest discovery came when he began to understand the building blocks of life itself, but his obsession with immortality led to his downfall. He trained a young apprentice, Sheev Palpatine, whom he groomed to be his successor. However, in a tragic twist, Palpatine's hunger for power would betray Plagueis. In the end, the very man Plagueis trusted struck him down, completing the cycle of power, obsession, and betrayal. Plagueis' life was one of darkness, calculated manipulation, and inevitable tragedy, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the galaxy's future. In the dark corners of the galaxy, a mysterious and dangerous plan unfolded. For centuries, the Sith had been silently weaving their web of corruption across the stars, infiltrating the highest echelons of power. One of their greatest tools was a masterful manipulator, who helped launch the Sith into the heart of society's elite. This apprentice, trained in both the sinister arts of the dark side and the sharpest tricks of business, traveled with his mentor, masquerading as an innocent accountant while learning the true power of politics and finance. As the Sith Empire evolved, it became clear. Combat skills were no longer enough. Diplomacy and wealth were now just as important. Plagueis, trained by his calculating master, became adept at navigating the shadowy underworld of the galaxy, hiding in plain sight while still manipulating from the darkest crevices. His journey led him to remote planets, away from the luxuries of the elite, and his time spent in these forgotten places shaped him into the master strategist he would become. With his mentor teaching him the art of subterfuge, Plagueis was ready for his first true test, a covert mission to a secret world, one erased from all records, where the Sith's real plans were about to unfold. On a distant world where violent natives worshipped dark masters like gods, apprentices were thrown into brutal trials of combat, a spectacle where survival meant strength. Amid these savage rites, one apprentice revealed a natural gift with the blade. His skill sharpened through relentless duels with his master, who found thrill in every clash. Yet, irony lingered, for the apprentice saw little glory in saber duels, dismissing them as theatrics and preferring the raw dominance of the Force. To him, the blade was not for sport, but for suffering and death. Still, to satisfy his master's hunger for combat, he trained until mastery became inevitable. In time, his first solo mission arrived. An assassination cloaked in elegance. At a grand banquet, he seized the moment, manipulating venomous delicacies and tightening the invisible grip of the Force until his target perished before the unsuspecting crowd, the crime masked as a tragic culinary mishap. Thus began the chilling path of a disciple whose power lay not in flourish, but in ruthless precision. The tale unfolds like a shadowed comic strip. He broke free from his master, returning to his ancestral world in hopes of building his own legacy, only to find scorn from half-blood kin who saw him as an intruder. Their father's failing third heart left a family scrambling for cures, but behind the curtain, he had already set the stage, paying off false healers while savoring each sibling's decline. Funerals became his theater, where he pretended grief before quietly claiming their fortunes. At last, all the wealth they tried to keep from him fell into his grasp. Yet, when the story was later told, suspicion lingered. Had he woven it as truth or as manipulation? Even when confronted, he admitted only fragments were real, leaving the line between fact and fabrication forever blurred. No one could ever be certain which parts of his tale were truth and which were lies, for he never revealed more than he wished. What was certain, however, was the outcome. His father and family were gone, leaving him as the sole heir to fortune and title, a position that carried immense weight within the clan tied to the very foundations of the Republic. This clan moved the tides of wealth across the stars, deciding which worlds rose and which fell, and now, through him, its power belonged to the Sith. With this new inheritance, he claimed not only vast riches, but also dominion over a moon steeped in history, once a retreat for the galaxy's most powerful, where secret councils shaped unseen destinies. Here he established his private empire, weaving politics, finance, and influence into a shadowy network that reached across the galaxy, a reminder that behind the murders and schemes lay an ambition far greater than wealth alone. Hego Damask's transformation into the dark path of the Sith was inevitable, as he realized the truth of his existence. The life he was born into, devoid of any normality, had turned out to be his greatest strength. Surrounded by those he now saw as weak and mundane, he understood that his destiny was to rule, and nothing could stop him. Not even Tenebrous, his once ally. With his business empire, Damus Holdings, he began his grand plan, constructing lavish resorts and palaces, each imbued with Sith symbolism, and hosting the secretive gatherings of the galaxy's most powerful figures. This elite ritual, a mix of ceremonial hunting and debauchery, was a means to subtly bring the galaxy's influential into his Sith fold, all while hidden Sith symbols whispered dark secrets known only to him. Meanwhile, Tenebrous, though back in the fold, began to differ in ideology. He believed that the key to victory lay not just in the dark side, but in combining it with the precision of bit science and advanced technology. With futuristic tools, Tenebrous envisioned a galaxy of peace, where even the Jedi would slowly fade away. Plagueis was convinced that, in time, he could challenge the Jedi Order and take their place as the galaxy's guiding force, shifting public favor towards the Sith. He envisioned a future where the Jedi would become a forgotten relic of the past, seen as ineffective. Tenebrous, however, disagreed, warning him that the Force did not bend to anyone's will. While the rise of the dark side might be inevitable, it could not be hurried. Plagueis, undeterred, argued that future events, even if foreseen, were clouded by uncertainty, and that he was raised to believe in completely eradicating all opposition. While Tenebrous believed in a gradual replacement of the Jedi, Plagueis saw them as enemies who must be completely destroyed. Unknown to him, Tenebrous had secretly begun training a new apprentice, Darth Venomous, seeing Plagueis as unfit for succession. This began the neglect of Plagueis' training. His master, no longer investing in him, assigned him menial tasks. But Tenebrous did take note of Plagueis' growing interest in midi-chlorians, a fascination that would shape the Sith Lord's future ambitions. In a galaxy teetering on the edge of darkness, Darth Plagueis the Wise begins his journey towards ultimate power. Trained by Darth Tenebrous, he quickly realizes that full control of the Force remains just out of reach, but he harnesses its microscopic elements like no one before him. His obsession with immortality and controlling life itself leads him to an experiment that could extend his own life long enough for his master's true plan to unfold. However, as Plagueis grows in power and knowledge, he becomes more aware of Tenebrous' overconfidence and the master's own ignorance of his apprentice's rising strength. As decades pass, Plagueis secretly hones his skills in the shadows, surpassing Tenebrous and plotting a path that would change the galaxy. This dark journey escalates as he travels to Bald Demnik with his master, to mine rare cortosis ore. There, amidst the searing heat of the mine, Tenebrous waxes philosophical about the ancient origins of the Sith and their pursuit of power, unaware that his own fate is sealed by the very apprentice he underestimated. The stage is set, and the rise of Plagueis is only beginning. Trouble began when the mining probe reached a highly combustible gas pocket, and the tread droid warned that the heat from the probe's hydraulic jacks would trigger an explosion. Despite orders to shut down, the droid ignored the command, its system sabotaged with the intent of killing the Sith Lords. The two were no strangers to enemies, and assassination attempts weren't out of the question in their dangerous business world. As they desperately tried to deactivate the probe using Force lightning, they found themselves hindered by the surrounding minerals, and the probe continued its course toward disaster. With no time left, the Sith Lords fled, using Force speed to escape the cavern, but Plagueis sensed his master's unspoken fear. Their escape led them to their ship, only for the probe to strike the gas pocket, unleashing a violent explosion. Tenebrous used the Force to contain the fireball, holding back falling rock debris that threatened their only way out. But in that moment, Plagueis understood the source of his master's fear. His own death was near. Seizing the moment, Plagueis used the Force to hasten the fall of the rocks, sealing his master's fate. The Bith had no time to react, and with that, Plagueis crushed his master. As the tremors subsided, Plagueis rushed to Tenebrous' side, pretending to care for his well-being. With his last breath, Tenebrous gave a final speech, instructing him to fulfill the grand plan. But in the middle of the heartfelt moment, the Bith's sharp mind calculated the truth. Plagueis had been the one to end him. Enjoying the moment, Plagueis snapped his master's neck, finally achieving the goal of the Dark Lord. Tenebrous clung to life for a few more minutes, and Plagueis observed the midi-chlorians in his body, still far from being able to influence them. He was intrigued by how they acted as a Force-sensitive being died. He thought about how, in Bane's day, an apprentice might fear their master's spirit leaping into them through essence transfer. Luckily for Plagueis, the knowledge of that ability had been lost. However, unbeknownst to him, Tenebrous had found a way around it. As Plagueis stood there, the midi-chlorians began to carry Tenebrous' intelligence, slipping into a wound on Plagueis' lower back caused by a falling rock. The Maxlorian virus began to propagate within his cells, and Tenebrous hijacked Plagueis' foresight abilities. As Plagueis peered into the future, what he saw terrified him. He saw himself dying at the hands of his own apprentice. In a panic, Tenebrous escaped to Plagueis' body. Trapped in an endless loop of his own death, the master's fate was sealed, leaving his apprentice to finally ascend. After a lifetime under his teacher's shadow, the apprentice claimed the mantle of Dark Lord, feeling the surge of forbidden power ignite within him. Tired of the rigid rule that bound master and student, he envisioned a new path, one where he alone could reign eternal, no longer shackled by ancient traditions. Yet survival came first. Wounded and stranded, he salvaged what remained, taking his master's weapon and belongings before forcing his way back to the surface. With speed fueled by shadowed energy, he crossed the hostile world in a single day, avoiding its reptilian natives and choosing stealth over slaughter. Resting in a hollowed cave, hunger gnawed at him, but he pressed on, the last of his kind, carrying the weight of both victory and isolation. He nearly gave in to the urge of raiding a nest to feast on eggs and the blood of the parents, but he restrained himself and turned instead to hawkbats and raw fish along the shoreline. As his path unfolded, a vision struck him, an image of a world torn apart in a sprawling war, coveted for its rare resources yet manipulated as a pawn in a larger, twisted game. Without realizing it, he had glimpsed the coming conflict of galaxies. His journey brought him to a small spaceport, where he sought a ship to carry him onward. The vessel he found was a cargo freighter hauling sea life, and he slipped aboard by hiding within a refrigerated crate, using his unique physiology to withstand the freezing cold. But secrecy could not last, and the crew discovered him, baffled at why one of such high standing would resort to stowing away. His wound betrayed him, staining the cargo, yet he offered to pay for passage and even cover the damage. The crew, suspicious, leaned toward turning him over to the authorities. Though he tried diplomacy, he knew exposure could not be risked, and no trace of his presence on this world could remain. The crew of the Woebegone could have spared themselves a brutal fate simply by accepting the money, but instead, they met a grisly end at the hands of the Sith Lord. One was left paralyzed by a kick, another reduced to bones by Force lightning, and yet, it wasn't a total loss for Plagueis. His fallen victims would become his new subjects, their lives now subjects of his experiments. Despite his failure to prolong their existence, Plagueis was undeterred. His attempt to manipulate the microscopic space of the midi-chlorians had failed, but for him, healing broken bones and organs was child's play. His frustration grew as his efforts to make his subjects' survival permanent fell short. In a rare moment of self-scorn, Plagueis blamed his sloppy lightsaber work for not prolonging their lives enough for proper study. With the only remaining witness to his failure being a multi-armed medical droid, Plagueis found some solace in droids. Unlike fleshy beings, they followed commands precisely, made no demands, and were far less troublesome. Despite the sneers of his fellow Sith, Plagueis' affinity for droids spoke to his practical nature, even in the face of the greatest failure of his career. Plagueis, a Sith Lord with an insatiable passion for artificial life, kept his obsession hidden, yet he amassed a considerable collection of droids at his secluded home on Moonlist. Among them, 114D would become his most loyal companion, serving him even to the end of his days. The journey began when Plagueis, after enduring countless battles, asked the droid to tend to his wounds and fetch some sustenance. Starving and weary, he made a brief stop at a space station, where a destructive event had wiped out all evidence of a catastrophic incident. This station, controlled by the Black Sun's boss, was a place Plagueis frequented. He soon acquired a new ship for the rest of his journey to Moonlist. Upon arrival, Plagueis, ever the master of manipulation, resumed his life as Magister Hego Damask II, blending seamlessly into society. Just a day ago, he had slaughtered his master, survived harsh conditions, and even taken down an entire ship crew. Yet here, he was a respected and refined entrepreneur, ready to handle business affairs. His first task, a confidential meeting with Lars Hill, his most trusted agent. There, he revealed the death of Rugus Gnome and instructed that his assets be claimed, focusing particularly on the valuable Sith artifacts that had belonged to his late master. Updated save memory Plagueis was on a mission. With the Baldemic situation handled, he turned his focus to acquiring land in the northeast quadrant, a valuable move in the pursuit of cortosis, an essential yet dangerous metal for the Jedi. They'd been given control over cortosis deposits, thanks to an agreement with the Senate. But Plagueis wasn't one to play by the rules, so he made sure to acquire the land through proxies to avoid any trace back to him. On top of that, he tasked Lars Hill with extending an invitation to the Subtext Mining Corporation, a move that was all part of a bigger plan for the upcoming gathering on Sojourn. But things weren't as simple as they seemed. Plagueis had his own agenda at the gathering. He intended to get to the bottom of the sabotage of the M2 mining probe. Though he had used the opportunity to dispose of his master, Rugus Gnome, it became clear that someone was gunning for both of them, nearly succeeding in their mission. Plagueis knew the key to uncovering the assassin was tied to the Subtext Mining Corporation, the ones who supplied the faulty droid. A quick detour to his volcanic sanctuary allowed Plagueis to introduce 114D to his new domain, an art-filled, data-driven haven where he stayed plugged into the galaxy's pulse. But beyond the fine art gifts, Plagueis' true treasure lay in the vast collection of ancient texts and endless media archives, where secrets about everything from trees to the most mysterious of galaxies were kept. Plagueis had an obsession with knowledge and immortality, hoarding ancient texts and rare writings from across the galaxy. His library was vast, containing everything from Sith histories to light side teachings. Within the fortress, hidden from most, he maintained a grotesque lab filled with a collection of creatures, some semi-sentient, others stitched together from parts of various species. Plagueis, driven by a thirst for eternal life, didn't seek the power of essence transfer. Instead, he focused on manipulating the very essence of life itself, studying what made beings age so slowly and even become immortal. As he toiled in his lab, with a medical droid by his side, he shared his ultimate goal: to achieve immortality through his deep research, not caring for the consequences or the risks of his obsession. Plagueis, a Sith Lord with an insatiable hunger for power and immortality, sought nothing less than the ultimate conquest control over life and death. Unlike his predecessors, who played petty games with clones or apprentices, he craved something far grander: to preserve his mind and body for eternity. However, the loss of crucial knowledge during the madness of a past Sith crisis left him with gaps in his understanding. He scorned the paths of others, dismissing the ancient Sith as failures who trapped themselves between life and death, their influence a forgotten echo. Plagueis, however, was different. His obsession drove him to the very heart of the Force, where he hoped to speak the language of the Ancient Ones. Alone in his laboratory, the dark side no longer whispered to him, it roared. A storm of destruction poised to rip through the Republic and the Jedi, clearing the way for a new order, where the Sith would reign supreme. And as he stood, the master of his own destiny, he knew that all who stood before him would fall, forced to bow before the coming Dark Empire. He stood at the heart of silence, the storm of death and stagnation swirling around him, hearing the whispers of ancient voices that had paved the way for the grand design. His power surged. His mission burned within him, daunting yet exhilarating, for the winds of change were now his to command. Soon after, the gathering commenced, a spectacle of hunts where the galaxy's elite reveled in ritual they never realized carried Sith shadows. As night fell, wine spilled, fires roared, and indulgence reigned, while the host oversaw it all with cold calculation. It was here that a deal was struck, promises of profit tied to races and worlds waiting to be claimed, influence spreading like wildfire beneath the veil of festivity. More emissaries followed, among them hardened voices seeking representation for forgotten worlds, creatures defiant even to the Force, and yet all came with outstretched hands, unknowingly feeding the rise of a master whose reach stretched further with every whispered bargain. Plagueis, the Sith Lord, had more on his mind than just their plight. He was testing the limits of his power. Trying twice to manipulate the mind of a secretary, he found to his surprise that his forced persuasion had no effect at all. His curiosity piqued. Plagueis began to wonder how beings with such low intelligence could resist the might of a Dark Lord. He made a mental note to capture one of their species for study. The meeting concluded with him reluctantly agreeing to their request for a Senate lobbying, though he warned it would take years or even decades, adding the condition that they would owe him a favor in the future. Then came the senator from May-Lair, angry over the pod race on Tatooine. He didn't take kindly to Plagueis' advice to raise fuel prices as a solution to the senator's financial woes, and left in a huff, vowing revenge. Plagueis brushed off the encounter, not realizing that Pax's team would become a significant problem later. But that was for another time, as Plagueis' true interest lay in meeting with the Gossam owners. Plagueis welcomed the Gossams, who had supplied the sabotaged M2 mining droid into his inner circle, showing them the horrific display of beasts chained and lifted to be slaughtered for the crowd's entertainment. The platform rose, threatening to blast them into oblivion, as Plagueis coldly discussed the success of their probe and the death of Rugus Gnome. Begging for their lives, the Gossams offered valuable information about an untapped plasma reservoir on Naboo, a resource that could power 1,000 worlds. They also revealed a faction on Naboo eager to overthrow the king and open the planet to galactic trade. Plagueis, intrigued, spared their lives and lowered the platform. With the knowledge he had gained, he began to plot a visit to Naboo, considering the possibility of using the opposition faction to replace the king and gain access to the planet's vast wealth. In a galaxy torn between the forces of ambition and secrecy, the Trade Federation finally agreed to expand free trade zones in the Outer Rim, risking its shipping monopoly in favor of gaining full Senate voting rights. Despite the initial reluctance over this loss of power, the Federation stood to gain from a massive payout linked to plasma exports, one which would pacify the leadership and solidify their control under the Sith's watchful eye. In a grand, covert gathering, Plagueis convinced business moguls and financiers that they were paving the way for a new era of control, an oligarchy that would rewrite the future of the Republic. But beneath their collective ambition, they were all mere pawns in a much darker scheme, one designed to weaken the Republic from within, setting the stage for its eventual downfall. With the Sith's methods now more refined than ever, using the allure of wealth just as easily as they wielded the dark side, they had become far more dangerous than ever before. As the elites returned to their mansions, Plagueis felt the weight of his own plans, unaware that one of his closest allies, a powerful Force wielder, was about to shatter his world forever. Thoughts raced. What if a Jedi had infiltrated his sanctuary? Plagueis dashed into the forest, lightsaber in hand, ready to face whatever threat awaited. But what he found was far more unexpected. A Bith, like Tenebrous, wielding a lightsaber, Darth Venomous. The Bith claimed to be the true apprentice of Tenebrous, sent to kill Plagueis in his master's final command. Shocked, Plagueis saw this new Sith as nothing but a pretender, unworthy of the title Darth. He relished in the news of Tenebrous' death at his own hands. Venomous, vowing revenge, declared his intention to surpass Plagueis as the true Dark Lord. Their blades clashed in a furious duel. Venomous' style, a direct counter to Plagueis'. Lightning-fast strikes lit the dark forest, a battle between equals or so it seemed, but as skilled as Venomous was, he couldn't land a decisive blow. Plagueis, however, had more than just his lightsaber. He had the Force. A power amplified by Tenebrous' death, Plagueis unleashed the full might of the dark side, striking like a lightning rod, leaving Venomous no choice but to face his true master. The battle between the two Sith was intense, but Plagueis' power ultimately overcame Venomous, disarming him and forcing his submission. Yet, Plagueis had no intention of taking on an apprentice, dismissing Venomous as a constant threat to his own safety. Instead, Plagueis revealed his vision for the future of the Sith, ruling not through raw power, but through political cunning and instilling fear. Venomous' fate was sealed, his life spared only for experimentation. Plagueis' twisted mercy involved forcing him to eat a deadly poison, ensuring he would never truly die, thus turning the Bith into his personal plaything. As Plagueis investigated potential apprentices, he quickly encountered a range of characters. A gambler deeply in debt, a prophet with dangerous foresight, and others who might either serve him or become rivals. One by one, Plagueis dealt with them, offering some freedom, while others met a grim fate at his hand. Each encounter brought him closer to finding someone worthy or destroying a threat. Plagueis, a Sith Lord, masterminds a grand plan to manipulate galactic events, beginning with the discovery of a false Sith, a pretender to the dark side. Watching from the shadows, he orchestrates a duel between the imposter and a Jedi duo, ultimately exposing the fraud. As he moves on to his next objective, the planet Naboo becomes the focal point of his ambitions. While seeking its plasma reserves, Plagueis uncovers a greater treasure in the form of a son from a powerful noble family, one destined to alter the galaxy's fate forever. Meanwhile, Naboo's political landscape is in turmoil. The royal election pits conservative isolationists against the liberals, with one party secretly negotiating with Plagueis' allies. The resulting scandal threatens to shatter public trust and complicate the already delicate situation, as alliances are tested and secrets begin to surface. In the Talo Party, some new allegations surfaced about the men and the royal family. Nearly 60 years ago, during the war between the Naboo and the Gungans, several nobles who now supported the crown secretly hired mercenaries. This had been kept hidden, but someone leaked the information, sparking a scandal that overtook the accusations against T'Polo. Varuna, surprisingly, revealed that the leak had caught everyone in the Talo Party off guard. They had not sent any spies, but through investigation, they traced the leak to a young member of the Palpatine family. Only someone with access to the secure family archives could have exposed such secrets. House Palpatine, which supported the royals' re-election efforts, now had a son who seemed to be defying his father by secretly supporting Talo's cause. This presented an opportunity for an ally within the royal camp, one who could offer valuable intelligence. Taking matters into his own hands, Plagueis decided to meet this rebellious young Palpatine. Upon his arrival on Naboo, he met with Varuna, Bon Apollo, and others to discuss future plans. Later, Hego visited the university where he found the young Palpatine, who insisted on being called just Palpatine in a subtle act of rebellion against his family. Despite the boy's hostility and refusal to be seen with Hego, who represented the Talo movement, Plagueis cornered him, hoping to persuade him into giving a brief tour of the university. In the shadowed streets of the city, the master pressed the boy with questions, reaching into him with the Force, yet finding only a wall of mystery. Humans were said to be difficult to read, but this boy was unlike any other. His mind a storm of conflict and ambition, concealed with an instinctive gift that left even the master blind. At last, the boy opened up, agreeing to serve as a spy, and soon the two spent their days together, sharing rides and secrets. The boy revealed a life of endless clashes with his father, a man who smothered scandal with wealth, even covering up the reckless destruction of lives caused by his own son. From this, the boy learned a bitter truth: power and money placed one above all consequence. He confessed his disdain for the Jedi, seeing them as servants chained to politics, blind to the true command the Force could offer. To him, the galaxy cried out for a leader far stronger than the Senate, one who would rise above the hollow rules that bound others. In a world where power, manipulation, and deception rule, a young, ambitious noble named Palpatine catches the eye of the Sith Lord Plagueis. The boy seems innocent, yet beneath his charming exterior, he's a master of political intrigue, capable of shaping the future of the galaxy. Plagueis, ever the strategist, is drawn to Palpatine not as a mere apprentice, but as a potential partner in his grand scheme to control life and death itself. He sees in the young noble not just an ally, but the key to unlocking a new phase of Sith power. As they work together, Plagueis begins to trust Palpatine, though his mind is torn between admiration and suspicion, especially when it comes to whether Palpatine possesses the Force. Meanwhile, Palpatine, seemingly innocent, is learning the ropes of politics, all the while secretly plotting to overthrow his master. The mentor-apprentice relationship twists as their ambitions collide. As Plagueis grows increasingly obsessed with immortality, he overlooks one crucial truth: it's the student who will ultimately betray the master. What started as a partnership of convenience turns into a deadly game of trust, deception, and inevitable treachery. The story of their rise is a dark political thriller, marked by ambition, betrayal, and the slow unraveling of Plagueis' own downfall. The Dark Lord still saw potential in the boy, even after their business on Naboo had ended, and chose not to break the bond between them. But when the moon returned to Naboo, he was met by guards and taken deep into the countryside to the grand estate of a powerful family. There, he faced the stern patriarch, who made it clear over a tense meal that Naboo should never join the Republic. When the Dark Lord showed indifference, the man threatened him with dire consequences if he did not abandon his current dealing. He demanded the Sith stay away from his son, revealing plans to send the boy off-world to a private academy. Soon after, travel restrictions and communication blocks cut the Dark Lord off from Naboo, giving the Royalists an advantage in the election. Determined, he found a chance to meet the boy again during a youth retreat on Chandrila, where he revealed every detail of the confrontation with the boy's father. Enraged by the thought of being controlled, the boy's fury shook the world around him, nature itself recoiling at his wrath. Desperate, he begged the Dark Lord for guidance, only to be asked what he truly desired. And at last, the truth spilled out. The boy yearned not just to defy his father, but to become a force that could change the galaxy itself. He wanted dominion, and the Shadowed Master rejoiced, seeing in the ambitious youth the perfect vessel to wear the mask of power, while an immortal will ruled unseen. The Master spoke of emancipation, of sacrifices and solitude, weaving a tale of his own ascent through betrayal and blood, whether true or not, meant to urge the boy toward the same path. Days later, in a hidden sanctuary where experiments twisted flesh and spirit, the Master felt a surge in the Force more potent than anything since his own Master's death. A desperate transmission arrived. The boy, shaken, confessed that his father had tried to spirit him away, leading to rage, defiance, and the slaughter of not just his father, but his entire kin and their guard. The Master was delighted. The trap of manipulation had sprung. He erased the evidence, dispatched his own agents, and soon welcomed the boy aboard his ship. Yet when they finally stood face to face, the youth did not bow but lashed out, accusing the Master of deception and control. And the Master, cold and unflinching, did not deny it. He admitted to using his Master's guidance, then coldly confessed the truth of his family's tale mattered little now. Though he was free and wealthy as he always craved, his true nature finally emerged. With chilling detail, he described how the killings unfolded, how bodies were hurled by thought, metal crushed like paper, how he had become a storm of death. His Master was stunned, beholding the raw revelation of power he had long awaited. Ecstatic, he saw before him the perfect ally, if only that power could be harnessed. Taking the risk, he revealed himself as a Sith Lord, showing that this was no cult but something far greater. Dropping his veil, he let the boy feel a glimpse of his own strength. Overwhelmed, the boy bowed, pledging himself to the Sith, receiving a new name sealed forever as apprentice. From then on, the Master dedicated himself to shaping the young one, beginning on frozen wastelands where he forced him to relive his darkest memory, stripping away his protection so he could endure the cold with nothing but his will. Darth Plagueis, a Sith Lord obsessed with power and immortality, sought to reshape the galaxy through political manipulation and his mastery of the dark side. He pushed his apprentice, Sidious, to embrace the harshness of the Sith path, testing his limits through brutal training and teachings about the rule of two. But Plagueis' ambition went beyond the ordinary Sith agenda. He dreamed of ruling as co-Dark Lords with Sidious, building a future free from jealousy and secrets. As Plagueis taught Sidious the importance of control and purpose, he downplayed mindless violence, preferring to build a grand vision for the Sith rather than indulging in bloodlust. However, Plagueis' downfall came not from external enemies, but from the very apprentice he had nurtured, Sidious, who struck when his master was at his most vulnerable, bringing an end to Plagueis' quest for immortality and control over life itself. This tragic tale of ambition, betrayal, and the dark side's inevitable cruelty ultimately set the stage for Sidious' rise and the galaxy's dark future. For 11 years, Plagueis rigorously trained his apprentice in the ways of the Sith. From facing his deepest fears to relinquishing his attachments, Plagueis pushed his apprentice, shaping him into a master of the dark side. They hunted dangerous prey on Buoyant, fought combat droids on Hyperray, and battled Corsidian natives as part of Plagueis' teachings. Throughout these trials, the Sith Lord instilled in his apprentice the philosophy that emotions, like hatred and envy, were tools to discard morality for a grander goal, total galactic domination. Plagueis taught that the Sith, like a cleansing fire, would reshape the galaxy, and that every being should be ready to either step aside or serve their will. But as the days passed, the Master knew the time was near when the Sith would rise again. Little did he know, the very apprentice he molded would one day betray him, fulfilling the inevitable cycle of Sith treachery. The galaxy owed them everything, for they had dragged it from stagnation and away from the brittle grip of the old order. Yet behind closed doors, these two figures shifted between vicious predators and polished icons of power. With the Elder's guidance, the younger slid effortlessly into the highest circles of politics, shaking hands with those who unknowingly paved the way for his ascent. Their schemes blurred the line between Shadow and Senate, every move calculated to place him on the path toward the highest seat of authority. From the moment he was drawn into the fold, elections bent in their favor, kings bowed to their will, and obstacles were quietly erased. At Sojourn, Beneath the weight of starlight and secrecy, their whispers gave shape to the grand design. A galaxy stripped of fragile peace, drowned in fear, and driven back to barbarism, where roaming armies and endless wars would render the old Guardians forgotten. When the Republic collapsed and memory of the Jedi turned to ash, the Sith would step forward, offering weapons, enemies, and the illusion of safety within cages of steel. For now, their game had only just begun. The revelation struck like a blade in the dark, forcing Plagueis to pause as the grand design he had long pursued finally began to take shape. Beyond politics, his experiments bore fruit, securing Senate representation for the Yuri in exchange for one of their prisoners, a subject through which he shattered their natural defenses against influence and bent their will to his command. In doing so, he uncovered secrets of midi-chlorians within their unique form, knowledge that whispered of forging the ultimate army against the Jedi. Drawn to Kamino, whose cloners once supplied beasts for hunts, he sought to create soldiers immune to the powers of his enemies. Yet the inherent fury of the chosen species proved too volatile, forcing him to delay his scheme. By 52 BBY, opportunity called on Sereno, where he arrived eager to represent his holdings and, more importantly, to engage with the Jedi he relished studying. There, figures of legend would stand before him, and Plagueis, always watchful, prepared to seize what insights the encounter might yield. He reflects on a bold idea. It's justice itself that matters, not those who claim to guard it. And that thought hits Plagueis hard as his grand scheme finally begins to take shape. Away from political games, his experiments are finally paying off. He secured Senate representation for the Yuri, and in return received one of their criminals for testing. After nearly 2 years, he breaks their natural resistance to mind control, giving him the terrifying ability to bend a Yuri to his will, and with it, crucial insight into midi-chlorians in this unusual species. Dreaming of forging the perfect army to wipe out the Jedi, he brings his research to Kamino, a world he's known since his early apprenticeship, where the cloners once supplied beasts for hunting rights. Discussing an army, he first pushes for Yin Yuri soldiers, since the resistance to force powers would give them a major edge over Jedi, but the cloners warn that their inherent aggression would make them too hard to command, so that plan is shelved for now. Later in 52 BBY, he heads to a gathering on Sereno, eager to represent his holdings, and just as eager to mingle with Jedi, something he relishes. This time, the guest list excites him even more. Master Dooku will be there, along with his apprentice and a fellow Jedi friend, and Plagueis can't wait to engage with them. Plagueis had always been intrigued by Dooku, seeing in him a Jedi, unlike the rest, graceful with a blade, sharp in diplomacy, yet grounded by a skeptical eye on the corruption eating away at the Senate. Decades earlier, Dooku and his former master had unknowingly disrupted Tenebrous' schemes, and that quiet defiance had not gone unnoticed. Now, while Plagueis was satisfied with his apprentice, he could not ignore the recklessness that came with Palpatine's growing hunger for power, a danger that made him consider the possibility of keeping Dooku as a contingency. When the meeting ended, Hego Damask remained with 3 Jedi, witnessing Qui, Gon's bold challenge against the Banking Clan's exploitation of the Outer Rim, a moment that revealed his insight and quiet strength. As the room emptied, the conversation between Plagueis, Dooku, and another Jedi turned toward the rot of the Senate and the weakness of its Chancellor. Their words drifting to the possibility of a divided Republic, core against Rim, foreshadowing the storm that was yet to come. He narrates the Senate's decay and the grim notion of fixing it through sheer force, while Sephodus keeps his emotions locked away, refusing to admit war might be coming. Plagueis, however, finds secret joy in planting seeds of uncertainty among the Jedi, especially within Dooku, and by the conversation's end, his plans for a clone army begin to change. Maybe unleashing enemy soldiers against the Jedi wasn't the right path. Maybe they needed an army that would fight beside the Jedi, only to strike when the moment was right. He senses Sephodus' hesitation and considers revealing the Kamino cloners, though the dark side whispers that the moment hasn't arrived. Months pass, and Plagueis arrives on Coruscant for a historic Senate vote, where worlds like Felia, Marana, and others backed by the Trade Federation seek official status, which would greatly increase the Federation's influence. This day also marks Palpatine's first true appearance as a senator of Naboo, and shockingly, Hego Damask greets him openly, chatting as if they were old friends, even with Jedi watching. Palpatine reels in surprise at his master's audacity, But for Plagueis, this open association is deliberate. Damask Goldings is a major power, and being seen as Palpatine's ally boosts the Senator's prestige and intrigue. It's a daring gamble, dangerous yet extremely rewarding, especially since it draws widespread attention. He reflects on a bold idea. It's justice itself that matters, not those who claim to guard it. And that thought hits Plagueis hard as his grand scheme finally begins to take shape. Away from political games, his experiments are finally paying off. He secured Senate representation for the Yuri, and in return received one of their criminals for testing. After nearly 2 years, he breaks their natural resistance to mind control, giving him the terrifying ability to bend a Yuri to his will, and with it, crucial insight into midi-chlorians in this unusual species. Dreaming of forging the perfect army to wipe out the Jedi, he brings his research to Kamino, a world he's known since his early apprenticeship, where the cloners once supplied beasts for hunting rights. Discussing an army, he first pushes for Yin Yuri soldiers, since the resistance to force powers would give them a major edge over Jedi, but the cloners warn that their inherent aggression would make them too hard to command, so that plan is shelved for now. Later in 52 BBY, he heads to a gathering on Sereno, eager to represent his holdings, and just as eager to mingle with Jedi, something he relishes. This time, the guest list excites him even more. Master Dooku will be there, along with his apprentice and a fellow Jedi friend, and Plagueis can't wait to engage with them. Everything erupts into chaos during the ceremony, as Pack's squad reveals a hidden agenda far worse than simply abducting Palpatine. And hooded Maladian assassins crash in with terrifying precision. Plagueis senses the danger through the dark side, yet hesitates. Unwilling to expose himself, a hesitation that nearly costs him his life when Lars Hill is beheaded, and a swarm of razorblade discs slaughters the entire council, leaving Plagueis wounded, his jaw partially severed and his neck torn open as the assassins draw vibroblades and butcher the survivors, forcing the Dark Lord bleeding, furious, with one of his hearts already failed to unleash his full Sith fury, shattering bones, cracking skulls, turning every object into a lethal projectile and boiling their blood with force lightning, while the disciplined Maladians refuse to retreat, adapting their strategy, circling like predators and searching for a moment to strike again as another of his hearts begins to falter. His body began to falter, agony nearly paralyzing him. Yet with sheer will, the Dark Lord raised a barrier none could pierce and unleashed a scream so fierce it shattered every ear around. Darkness surged again, shaking the ground and hurling assassins off their feet, as he prepared to rain destruction with the last sparks of his power until his apprentice stormed in. The two together became a storm of shadow, crushing those foolish enough to strike at them, leaving the floor drenched in ruin. But even victory bore scars. The Master, torn and broken, needed a mask to breathe, marked forever by how close death had come. His apprentice, seething with fury, swore vengeance and carried it out with merciless precision. In time, summoned to a hidden mountain stronghold, the apprentice beheld the vast treasury of forbidden knowledge his master had gathered, and the legacy of their dark bond grew ever deeper. In the shadowed halls of his master's domain, the apprentice beheld wonders both grotesque and awe-inspiring monstrous creations, forbidden experiments, and even beings infused with the Force itself. The place pulsed like a nexus of darkness. A lair where his master revealed plans of abandoning politics to pursue immortality and the mysteries of the Sith, while entrusting all manipulation of power and wealth to his protege. The master's vision was clear. Retreat into seclusion, devote every breath to unraveling the secrets of life and death, and let the apprentice become the face of their grand design, orchestrating political schemes to enrich the core and starve the outer reaches. Yet in this council of shadows, a need emerged, an acolyte, one skilled in stealth and combat, bound to serve but never to rise, ensuring the rule of two remained unbroken. It was then the apprentice, with chilling composure, revealed something that would forever shape their future. A child from a distant world was brought forth, destined to grow into a silent blade of the dark side. The Master, ever curious, approved this dangerous experiment, and the sands of time began their slow fall once more. 10 years passed, years of tireless study, until at last the Master revealed his newfound power over life itself, pulling a broken traitor again and again from the jaws of death only to cast him back. The apprentice stood shaken, forced to witness the terrifying dance between mortality and resurrection, a cruel cycle that ended only when the body could endure no more. To the Master, this was not cruelty but revelation, a sign that the balance of the cosmos itself could be bent towards shadow. Together, Master and Apprentice sank into deep meditation, shifting the scales of destiny and blinding the Guardians of Light from glimpsing what was to come. Emboldened, the Master stretched his will across the galaxy, striving to weave new existence from raw essence to impose design upon creation itself. Yet, in this audacious act, his reach exceeded his grasp, and the galaxy held its breath at what he had unleashed and what had refused to answer. The Force fell silent to his command, and after the ritual, every subject of his twisted experiments, especially those created through its dark manipulation, succumbed to sickness and perished. In frustration, the Dark Lord released most survivors, while some altered beasts adapted to the wilds of Sojourn. Though he could still summon it, the Force itself recoiled from him, leading him to believe it actively resisted the Sith. This revelation became his greatest enemy, not rival orders, not politics, but the very Force standing against his will. Still, Master and Apprentice rose in influence, shaping galactic events, fueling unrest in distant worlds, and testing both Jedi and Senate alike. A violent conflict erupted, shaking faith in the Jedi and widening cracks in the Republic, with blood spilled even at their temple's gates. As years passed and secessionists struck boldly, the galaxy edged closer to chaos. Then came the final turn. Withdrawn and reclusive after surviving an assassination attempt, the Dark Lord lingered in isolation, his shadow preparing the stage for the tragic end soon to come. Droids still kept the credits flowing across the galaxy, but rarely did they cross paths with their master. The dark figure now wore a triangular breath mask of his own design, twin tubes running to a chest respirator, a grim reminder of the attempt on his life that had left him frail in body yet towering in power through the Force. Determined to never be vulnerable again, he abandoned sleep and dedicated decades to relentless experiments with midi-chlorians, clawing at the secrets of creation and decay, life and death, desperate to stretch his existence beyond its natural bound. Yet obsession came at a terrible cost. The grand halls he once filled with gatherings crumbled into neglect, while his mind unraveled under the weight of endless trials. He withdrew into seclusion, seen only by loyal guards who whispered of shattered chambers, failed subjects, and machines left broken. Thin, unwashed, and lost in erratic fits, he relied on a droid to relay his will, while his apprentice grew wary of a master slipping into madness. In that silence, the apprentice seized the chance to train alone, stepping into forbidden worlds once kept from him, and the balance between master and disciple shifted in ominous ways. From the shadows of a mountain stronghold, the apprentice quietly devoured forbidden knowledge, all while suspecting his master of being too consumed with his own ego and blind to the larger design. The master, obsessed, reckless, and dangerous, left the burden of strategy to his pupil, who was already shaping events across the galaxy with a cunning unseen since ancient times. While the Senate descended into endless bickering and the Republic's foundations trembled under the demands of powerful factions, the apprentice prepared his path to supreme office, intent on placing himself at the center of order. He spoke of partnership, yet every move tightened his grip on destiny, every scheme disguised beneath the chaos of galactic politics. And when he revealed the progress of his deadly protege, whose blade carried echoes of forgotten legends, even the master was struck with awe. What he did not realize was that his greatest achievement was no longer his own. The moment had come for the master plan to move forward, and he instructed his apprentice that it was time to reveal themselves to carefully chosen allies. The first target was a greedy leader, to be tempted with a lavish gift and the promise of power within the Trade Federation, so long as he swore loyalty. This scheme would set the stage for a blockade, proving the weakness of the Chancellor and triggering a vote of no confidence, paving the way for the Sith's chosen candidate to seize office. Yet the newly crowned ruler of Naboo might not be so easily controlled. As the apprentice set off to pull strings, the master moved his own pieces, opening his hidden world to outsiders for the first time in decades. One visitor was a cunning crime lord, eager to replace a rival who had failed to pay her debts. He offered the Sith support and in return delivered secrets about a shadowy group of fanatics led by a fallen Jedi. This revelation would ripple through the years, passed from master to apprentice, then to another who would embrace the dark side and rise as a Sith Lord himself. From there, the fanatics would become pawns in a deadly test for a bounty hunter destined to shape the future of an entire army. While elsewhere in the galaxy, the web of Sith ambition spread ever wider. The stage was set on Naboo, where a corrupt ruler had lost the love of his people after years of bowing to outside powers. Desperate to push back, he built sleek new starfighters, but his supposed ally whispered that the Senate was about to grant the very enemy he opposed the right to arm itself. The ruler faced a trap: support the Federation and lose his throne, or rebel and be crushed. While he plotted in anger, the cunning senator secretly courted the family of a young governor adored by the people, promising her path to the crown. Word of this betrayal reached the king, who arranged a lavish banquet to confront his rival. Surrounded by shadowy figures from the underworld and bitter enemies of his old associates, he declared his intent. Once re-elected, he would strip the senator of his power, sever ties with the Federation, and instead turn to darker allies waiting eagerly at his side. The tale unfolds like a grim comic panel where betrayal and survival collide. After turning against the Sith, the cunning politician assured the king he would inform his masked ally of the decision, only to be told he would never see that ally again. Meanwhile, on the distant moon, the Dark Master tore through his fortress in desperation, erasing every trace of his experiments and destroying every beast he had unleashed before fleeing aboard his ship as a fleet of war vessels descended. His enemies, allied and merciless, rained destruction and unleashed nuclear fire that reduced his proud citadel to ash and glass, leaving him shaken by emotions he thought long buried. Yet survival clung to him, and beyond the devastation, a hidden rescue awaited. A massive ship drew him in with its beam, offering escape. With his life preserved, the Master demanded a course set for the great capital and a channel open to the royal world, intent on declaring his survival and ensuring the ruler knew his hand still reached across the stars. The terror of vengeance drove one ruler to flee his throne in panic, leaving the way clear for a young regent to claim power in a sweeping victory. As new policies ignited fury among the trade guilds, a hidden hand installed a viceroy who quietly erased his rivals and prepared for blockade. In the shadows, two dark figures convened, their master now revitalized and formidable, no longer the broken recluse but a force reborn. His apprentice looked on with awe and envy, convinced that survival itself had made him near divine. Together they plotted with precision, using compassion as a weapon, knowing the new queen's mercy would set the stage for manipulation and war. Factories thrummed with the birth of armies, the pieces of a larger conflict already in motion, while whispers of clones bred in secrecy hinted at battles yet to come. Plagueis had discovered the one figure capable of ensuring the creation of a clone army, a shadowed manipulator who would move events exactly as the Sith required, and soon the Jedi would unknowingly wield the very force meant to undo them. With both sides of the war under careful watch, everything was falling into place. Yet for Plagueis, vengeance remained unfinished. He would not send another to confront Varuna, but instead stalked him himself, slipping like a phantom into the former king's chambers. Silencing him with a merciless grip, he revealed the truth of his identity, the legacy of his Sith lineage, and all the while drained his life away by commanding the very essence within his blood. By the time Varuna realized the power before him, death had already claimed him, the product of 2 decades of mastery over the dark side. Now holding dominion over life and death itself, Plagueis turned his gaze to the next step, engineering the grand design of the clone army, while the stage of politics unfolded at a glittering gala where candidates for the highest office vied for power. A grand gathering filled with powerful figures saw Jedi masters among the crowd, yet behind closed doors, Plagueis whispered with his apprentice about a failed mission before donning his mask as Damask to speak with a Jedi seer. Their exchange turned toward the fragile state of the Republic, with the mask warning of the Trade Federation's secret weapons and the growing rift between the core and the rim. The Jedi admitted to troubling visions of conflict, but revealed that his council dismissed them. Plagueis pressed further, declaring that the Republic needed an army before it was too late, introducing the idea of hidden cloners and offering to fund the project himself through shadowed channels. Though hesitant, the Jedi listened as Plagueis painted it as nothing more than a safeguard, a secret weapon waiting in the shadows. And while the Jedi asked for time to reflect, the seed of doubt and destiny had already been planted. From afar, the two Jedi had managed to rescue the Queen and break through the blockade, vanishing into deep space. A false signal sent by a dark warrior exposed their landing on a desert world, stirring fear in a hidden master who briefly considered calling upon an old underworld debt, but dreaded the price the shadows might demand. Haunted by paranoia and unable to see the future, he sensed failure ahead while his apprentice maneuvered within the Senate. On the sands, the duel revealed the crimson blade of a Sith, and the Jedi soon prepared to reach the capital. The Master refused to appear beside his apprentice, fearing the presence of two powerful Jedi would expose their secrets. His fear of one of them ran so deep that it consumed his thoughts. Then came the revelation that shattered his designs. His apprentice met with a Jedi who had chosen to leave the Order, bringing news of a boy, no more than 9, born of a slave with no father, yet carrying an impossibly high connection to the Force, hailed as the Chosen One. From afar, the two Jedi had managed to rescue the Queen and break through the blockade, vanishing into deep space. A false signal sent by a dark warrior exposed their landing on a desert world, stirring fear in a hidden master who briefly considered calling upon an old underworld debt but dreaded the price the shadows might demand. Haunted by paranoia and unable to see the future, he sensed failure ahead while his apprentice maneuvered within the Senate. On the sands, the duel revealed the crimson blade of a Sith, and the Jedi soon prepared to reach the capital. The Master refused to appear beside his apprentice, fearing the presence of two powerful Jedi would expose their secrets. His fear of one of them ran so deep that it consumed his thoughts. Then came the revelation that shattered his designs. His apprentice met with a Jedi who had chosen to leave the Order, bringing news of a boy, no more than 9, born of a slave with no father, yet carrying an impossibly high connection to the Force, hailed as the Chosen One. The energy reading soared higher than ever before, leaving one master stunned while another dismissed them with indifference, certain the Council would never agree to train the boy. Yet the Dark Apprentice trembled, haunted by memories of an experiment 9 years past, when he and his master had tried to create the ultimate being. Meanwhile, the Master himself was hurrying toward the Senate, eager to witness a pivotal moment in galactic politics, when a sudden message from his apprentice changed everything. Abandoning his course, he raced through the halls of the Republic's towering spire, desperate to confirm the truth for himself that this boy was said to be untouched by the Force and believed to be the Chosen One. Driven by urgency, he demanded to see the child, only to discover he had already been taken to the Jedi Temple. Panic welled within him as he realized the Council's decision could reshape the galaxy. If the boy was trained, the Sith's grand design might collapse, and his mind echoed in despair with the question, have we been undone? The Master met with his apprentice as they attended the grand session where the nomination for Chancellor thundered through the rotunda, the chamber erupting in deafening approval while the apprentice savored the moment as though victory itself had arrived. Yet the Master, ever cautious, sought certainty beyond the cheers. Later, from a distant perch, he observed a Jedi and a young boy leaving the temple, pausing in quiet conversation about mysteries that weighed heavily on the child's mind. Through magnification, he could not grasp the words, but through the Force he reached further, only to be struck by visions. Starships aflame in battle, blades of light clashing, a black armored figure rising from shadows. When the images dissolved, the pair had vanished, and the Master was left with clarity and dread. The boy was destined to alter the fate of history, but the Jedi must fall, and the apprentice's blade was meant to ensure it. While the currents of the unseen wavered, the political tide surged without pause, and the apprentice was proclaimed Supreme Chancellor. That night, Master and apprentice cloaked themselves in celebration at the opera, before retreating to a private penthouse high above the city, dismissing all guards so that only their voices and schemes filled the darkened air. The celebration thundered with laughter and overflowing wine as victory filled the air, the Master drifting into drunken sleep for the first time in decades, while his apprentice rehearsed words of glory with venom hidden beneath the tone. Yet as silence crept in, a whisper from the shadows coiled through the room, the same haunting murmur once heard long ago, promising power and inevitability. The apprentice froze, cloak in hand, knowing this was the single chance that would never return. For the Master was too powerful, too wise, too enduring, except now, vulnerable in slumber. In a blur of lightning, the fragile barrier of immortality shattered, and the Master's eyes snapped open in shock, clawing at life, gasping for breath, reaching for the Force as the apprentice mocked him with cruel words, hurling every betrayal, every withheld secret, every manipulation back at him. The dark chamber crackled with fury and scorn as the apprentice unleashed his storm, delivering not just death, but a twisted rehearsal of triumph, the final lines of a speech written in fire and shadow. What unfolds is the portrait of a figure who became the unseen master of an entire galaxy, pulling the strings of money, politics, and influence until the Republic itself danced like a puppet in his grasp. He laid the groundwork for the rise of the Sith and even the coming of the Clone Wars. His cunning and intellect so profound that even his own apprentice stood in awe. Yet the brilliance that made him seem untouchable also sealed his fate. For the first chance of betrayal was the only one his apprentice would ever need. As this tale closes, the reminder lingers that his legacy remains both feared and forgotten. A story wrapped in shadows and whispered in places where Jedi would never speak. What unfolded was the chronicle of a life spent weaving invisible strings across an entire galaxy. A master who bent money, politics, and influence into tools of control, making the Republic itself dance like a puppet. He shaped the rise of the Sith and laid the foundation for the great war that would follow. And though many speak little of him, his blend of raw power, intellect, and sinister cunning placed him among the most formidable figures of galactic history. Even his apprentice, often stunned by such mastery, understood that hesitation would mean no second chance, and so betrayal came at the first opportunity. And as the tale concludes, gratitude is offered to those who journeyed through this shadowed history, for it is a story seldom told, one whispered beyond the reach of the Jedi.